Today I'm going to be reviewing the Tanchjim Tanya. It's a 7mm single dynamic driver budget IEM that comes in at $20. Now, in my previous video, I reviewed the Kinera BD005 Pro, which that was also a budget IEM, but that one was around $50, and it exceeded my expectations for that price range. So, does the Tanchjim Tanya exceed my expectations for the $20 price range? We're going to find out right now here on Audio in Reviews. Okay, so let's talk about what you get in the package for $20 with the Tanchjim Tanya. Of course, you have the IEM itself. You've got 5 pairs of tips. Some have the large bore hole, some have the small bore hole. I use the large here with a narrow bore hole. These seem to work the best for me. They isolate well, they seal well. You also get extra filters here. And that, of course, replaces this filter here whenever you need to replace that. And of course, you also get this soft case. Now, as far as the design and build of the Tanya, you have just a basic cylinder shape housing. You have a vent. As you can see here, you have the name Tanya here printed on the side. On this one, it says Tanchjim. I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up. It doesn't have a the cable is permanently attached to the IEM itself, so you can't disconnect the cable. The cable is decent. Again, for $20, I don't think this is cheap by any means. I think this is actually probably better than what I would expect for a $20 IEM. The overall build quality is good. I've used these a lot over the last month or so, and they've been in a lot of pockets, in a lot of cases, and they've held up quite nicely. So I think the build quality overall is very good, again, especially for the $20 price range. The cable is soft and is comfortable. Now, as far as the isolation and the overall comfort of the IEM, these are very, very comfortable. They're pretty small, and they have a fairly deep, because of the narrow size, the small diameter of the housing itself, and just combined with the length of the tip, they have a fairly deep insertion, at least on my ear, and they fit quite nicely. Of course, you can wear these over the ear, but they're a little more comfortable for me anyways, with the wire hanging down below my ear instead of over my ear. So the isolation is good. I'd say it's about average. And again, with these tips, I can get a pretty good seal, and it tends to block out any surrounding noise fairly well. So when I'm listening, and again, I'm not in a loud environment, and I have used these in a car ride on our vacation a couple of weeks ago, and they seem to do a pretty good job of blocking out noise. So anyways, as far as design, build, isolation, and comfort, these are, again, I would say much better than I would expect for the $20 price point. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the sound. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the overall sound of the Tanya. According to Tanchjim, the Tanya follows a Harman target. And if you look at the Tanchjim graph and compare it to a Harman target, they are pretty close. Now, if you look at the graph of the Tanya, what you're going to see is a lot of lower mid bass and bass presence. So this does have what I would consider to be kind of a warmer neutral sound signature. But diving a little deeper into the graph, if you starting with the treble, what you're going to see is it does have a smoother treble presentation. So there's not a whole lot of upper treble presence past 10K, and of course that does affect air in live recordings, and it's still pretty present, but I wish there was a little bit more. You have a peak at around 10K, and then it kind of slowly comes down a little bit, and then it goes back up, and you have a really large peak right at around 3K, and then past the 3K as you come into the mids bottom out right at around 600K. They start to go back up into the lower mids and mid bass, and again you have a substantial amount of lower mid bass and bass presence when you look at the graph, and it peaks out right at around 50 hertz in the sub bass. So again, warm IEMs kind of appeal to me. Generally, I like that fuller sound. Now again, the only thing I wish there was a little bit more of in the Tanya was that upper treble presence. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in a little deeper and talk a little more specifically about the treble, mids, and bass. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the treble of the Tanya. Now again, we talked about that peak right at around 10K, and past the 10K point, there is some treble roll off. That does affect air in live recordings, but you still have the recordings I generally will go to are, I've got the Jazz, the Pawn Shop, and Hoff Ensemble, and now I've added several others to the list. And each of these recordings kind of have their own attributes. The Jazz, the Pawn Shop has a little more of a narrow sound stage because it was recorded in a smaller space, and then the Hoff Ensemble, a little bit of a wider one. These do a great job at representing both intimate recordings and wide soundstage recordings. So these do have a fairly wide, I would say above average wide soundstage. Now, and again, even though you have that roll off past 10K and it's lacking a little bit of that air, I would say I got a lot of enjoyment still out of most live recordings. Now, that 10K peak, they tuned that 10K frequency. It still gives a good amount of sizzle and attack to cymbals. Cymbals sound natural. There's a decent, I would say average amount, maybe a little above average amount of detail retrieval out of the cymbals. And I would say as I go through the different frequencies, one thing you're going to notice that I talk about is how they sound natural. That's one of the things that really stood out to me about this IEM, is its ability to represent natural tones really, really well. So throughout the entire frequency spectrum, everything sounded, instruments sounded really natural, vocals sounded natural. So cymbals sounded natural. The attack on snares sounded really, really good. Hi-hats had that good sizzle that I always look for. And also some of the upper treble frequencies and some of the other instruments and stringed instruments sounded really, really natural. So overall, the treble presentation was quite good. Even though you have a little bit lacking past 10K, the overall treble presentation in the Tanya is good, and I would say even again competes, hits way above its price point at $20. Okay, so coming out of the treble into the mids, as you move past that 10K peak, there, of course, it begins to drop off, and then it bottoms out right at around 600 hertz. Now, so past that 10K, as you move past 8, 9, 7K, 6K, 5K, there's still a substantial amount of lower treble and upper mids presence, and it doesn't, I would say that where it bottoms out, it's not overly recessed. I would say they picked just the sweet spot, for at least for my personal taste. I think the mids are just tuned perfectly, almost perfectly with this. I love, and again, the overall tuning generally I think of this is just spectacular, and again competes way above the $20 price point. So, and the mids are no exception. The mids are just excellent in this, and again talked about instrument tone and sound. In the mid, all the instruments that fall within those mid frequencies, trumpets, guitars, some of the drums, the higher toms, the 10-inch tom, 13-inch tom, 14-inch tom, a lot of those higher tones in the drums and the snare all sound very natural. Vocals, the female vocals aren't more forward than males. Neither are the males more forward than the females. It seems like they did a really good job of making sure that both female and male vocals presentation is about equal. And again, the overall timbre, you don't have the BA timbre issues with these. Everything in the mids, again, so as far as the level of mids, great. Overall tone of the mids and natural sound of instruments are excellent with the Tanya. Okay, so moving out of the mids into the bass, again, it bottoms out in the mids right at around 600 hertz, and it starts to increase past that point. So as you move into the lower mids and mid bass, it starts to increase substantially, giving it that warmer kind of sound signature. So I've always talk about, every time I talk about my deeper tuned snares, if a drummer is tuning his snare deeper, a lot of typically you'll find that in more usually rock genre, but I want to hear that deeper tuned snare, and also again a lot of those lower mids and mid bass tones again affect the toms, even the kick drum, depending on how he has his kick drum tuned, the floor toms. I want my drums, because I'm a drummer, I want my drums to sound natural, and I want whatever that drummer, however he has his drums tuned, snares, his toms tuned, snares tuned, I want to be able to, I want to hear that. I'm really deliberate when I'm on the drums and I'm tuning my drums. I'm really deliberate about the tone that I choose for my toms and my snare and my kick. So that's one thing I always listen really closely to, and I think that's one thing that appeals to me about the warmer sound signatures, is it just seems like it tends to lend itself a little better to nice sounding drums. And of course I like the attack too. I want to hear the snare attack. If it's there, I want to hear it. But the bottom line is, as far as the lower mids, mid bass, these do an excellent job at representing, and it's not overly warm. I would say it's not overly bassy. I would say it's an appropriate amount of warmness and bassiness. So I think that the lower mids and mid bass presentation on this is right where I like it. And so as you move out of the mid bass and the lower, the bass and sub bass, again, you have that peak right at around 50 hertz, and that is a sub bass frequency. So you're definitely it's not lacking sub bass presence at all. I've talked about Yoshi Hirakawa's, there's a recording that I use, Interlude. And again, I've talked about this in other reviews, is where the song, it sounds like a guy's in a rowboat and he's rowing down in a lake or something, and you can hear a lot of the birds chirping, and you can really hear the air and the atmosphere. And as the song progresses, you hear this sub bass frequency kind of pulsating, and it slowly kind of gets a little bit louder, but it's a pretty low frequency. And then a little farther into the song, you have this sub bass to bass sweeping sound. So it starts at a really low sub bass frequency, and then kind of sweeps up to a higher bass frequency, and then fades out. And that continues throughout the song. So it's a good test track for kind of listening for sub bass and bass presence. And now again, this is a 7mm dynamic, a single 7mm dynamic driver. And this thing really does a really good job of handling bass. Of course, it's a dynamic driver, so it's not a super fast bass, not a super accurate bass. But again, I would say for a $20 IEM overall, throughout the entire frequency spectrum, this thing does a great job. I would say that not only is this my favorite IEM at $20, I would say it's probably one of my favorite IEMs even under the $50 to $75 price range. This thing hits way above its price point. And again, we talked about the build quality, the fit. Build quality is good. I would say even better than what I would expect for 20 bucks. The fit is great. The tips they give you are really good. I use the large. I get a really good seal. They're very comfortable. And the cable is good. It's not great, but it is definitely good enough. So overall, I would say Tanchjim really paid attention to, I think they focused on the tuning of the IEM, which is what I would want anyway. I would say, I don't care how awesome the build is or how awesome it looks, if it doesn't sound very good. I would rather it sound really good and then just have, you know, a good enough build quality. And I would say this is better than good enough. This is actually, again, I would say it's better than what I would expect for 20 bucks. So if you're in the market, again, if you're in the market for a budget IEM, I would definitely pay attention to the Tanya. You might want to check this out. There's a lot of people that really like this, and I'm definitely one of them. I would say that Tanchjim did an awesome job with the Tanya. So, all right, well, cool. Well, that does it for this review. Thank you guys so much for watching my videos. Sorry about the delay with the videos. I've been having a lot of stuff going on, just really busy, and so I'm trying to get these videos out as quickly as I can. So, but thank you guys so much for watching. Please like these videos. Please share these videos. Hope you guys have an awesome day. We'll see you next time.